There are two types of errors that can occur in measurements. So when we measure anything, we use certain instruments, right? And measurements are not always perfect. Sometimes errors occur, and sometimes errors occur systematically and consistently. So there are two types of errors. One is a random error. Let's say you're measuring something in a chemistry lab and the scales show 0.035 grams, and you make a note of it in your lab manual, and when you write it down, let's say you write it as 0.35 grams. Now that is a random error. You just forgot that one instant, you just forgot to put the zero there. So it happened once in a way, just by mistake, it was an error. So that would be called a random error. And things like this happen all the time. Let's say we are solving some sort of a compound interest problem and the interest rate is 7.5%, and 7.5% is 0.075, and sometimes students will write 0.75 instead of 0.075, which really is a 75% interest rate. So that is a major error, and it happened just because the student was not paying attention for a moment. So it's a random error. Now, what is a systemic or systematic error? If, let's say, you depend on the clock in your student lounge to get into your next class, and it consistently shows 5 minutes slow. Let's say the real time is 10 a.m. and somehow the clock in your student lounge is set to 9:55 a.m. So consistently this clock is going to be 5 minutes behind the real time. So every time you depend on this time, it's going to be an error of 5 minutes and you're behind by 5 minutes. Now, unless someone comes and corrects this problem and sets the time 5 minutes ahead, this error is going to keep happening, and that is called a systemic error. So that's the difference between a random error and a systemic error. Random error happens once in a while, just by mistake. And a systemic error happens consistently because something is wrong with the system that is being used for measurement. Now let's look at this one problem with several examples. What kind of errors could possibly happen when the population of a Michigan town is obtained by a census count? So a census is when you collect data from each household in this Michigan town and you enter it into a system, and then of course the data is analyzed after that. So usually people enter these numbers into the system. What if instead of 7,500, someone who was entering it put an extra zero by mistake? They were entering some number which is really supposed to be a 7,500, and it was just a human error, a random error, because it happens only once in a way, and by chance the person put an extra zero at the end. Now that would be called a random error. Let's say just a typo. But what if the system that you're entering all this information into is not correct? the system, something is wrong with the system, and sometimes things like that happen to computer systems. And let's say the computer census form will skip every fifth name in the list. Something is wrong with the system. Okay, and every fifth name is kind of skipped or not taken into consideration by the system, which is your computer system. In that case, this would be a systemic or a systematic error, because something is wrong with the system that is being used to collect these data. Now let's look at the next example. Running times at a 10-kilometer race. Okay, so let's say the person who's in charge of measuring the running time at a 10-kilometer race, it's done using a stopwatch, for example, and the person who is collecting this sort of information, which is the completion time of this race, had this stopwatch or a clock that was consistently showing 1 minute less for every 10 minutes of running time. So every 10 minutes that someone runs, it shows just 9 minutes. So that's a huge error in collection of data. And that's not because something is wrong with the person operating it and he's not making random mistakes, but the system that he's using to measure time itself is defective. So every single time there will be an error consistently, and that is called a systemic error. But let's just say that the person who is recording this time, who is in charge of this stopwatch, makes a mistake, maybe drops the stopwatch and it just stops a little before it should. Then obviously the recording time is going to be wrong. There will be an error. So it's a random error because he's not consistently dropping the stopwatch. It just happened to be that way for that one time. So that's why it is a random error. It just happened by chance. But a systemic error will happen consistently until the system is fixed. Now the next one, the number of M&Ms in a 1-pound bag. In this case, again, there is an error in the manufacturing system, right? So all this is done not manually. Bags are filled by machines, and machines are programmed in a way that the exact amount is filled in a 1-pound bag. So let's say there was something wrong with the programming of this machine and somebody made a mistake in the program and it fills only 13 ounces instead of 16 ounces. So every bag that goes through the system is going to have 3 ounces less, not because of a human error that is random or it happens just by chance, but this machine is going to consistently have this error until the system itself is fixed at some point. Somebody notices it and they fix the system. It'll consistently keep filling the bag with less than 1 pound of M&Ms. So that would be a systemic error. Now, what would a random error look like? Okay, let's say there was a massive power failure in the manufacturing facility where the M&M bags are being filled, and the one bag that was being filled at that moment probably will have a smaller quantity of M&Ms, and once the machine starts again, it's going to go through the system, and that one bag is going to have the wrong amount of M&Ms, the wrong weight of M&Ms. But once the machine starts and the power is back, the rest of the system starts operating in a normal way. So that would be considered a random error because it just happened by chance. So I think you get the idea now, the difference between a random error and a systemic error. Systemic is when the system consistently makes the same mistake over and over again, and it'll keep going until the system is fixed. A random error can happen by chance, just once in a way.